Hello and welcome to the Sunday edition of Talking Horses. I'm Maggie Wolfendale. Please be joined by Sarah Elbadwi. And Sarah, we got a 9-race car. We're fast and firm and looking forward to the Knickerbocker.
Yeah, absolutely. We have it on earlier today to accommodate some TV scheduling, but really looking forward to that race. And we get these short fields, and it's still not any easier to figure out who might be your eventual winner when everybody has similar credentials coming in.
Exactly, and I thought some interesting 2-year-old races too, and we'll get to that right away with the first race. We also saw some good performances. The QE2 down at Keeneland with She Feels Pretty. I thought that was impressive, and Spaladay as well.
Yeah, I mean, monster performance from She Feels Pretty, finally getting to save a little bit of ground and really looking loaded at the top of the stretch in that race, and very impressive because that was a good field with some European influence as well, and she really just demolished them. And then Spaladay totally proved me wrong. I was sort of wondering where she fit from a class standpoint, but she was able to get the victory without a perfect trip yesterday. So.
Yeah, 3-year-old fillies to watch in that turf division. But if you want to play today's races, there's only one way to do so, and that is with a Naira Bets account. And as always, those new customers can earn that $200 deposit match bonus when they use promo code MATCH200. Make sure you head on over to NairaBets.com, and once you do that, you can get things rolling and become a informed better with the track stats when you visit NairaBets.com, and you can get all the inside information with the track trends. I know I always use them, as well as statistics and some betting insights. Also, we have that superfecta bonus. If you hit a super here at Belmont at the Big A, you get a 20% bonus. Just make sure you, as always, opt in, and you can catch, well, the first 4 on America's Day at the races. Coverage starts at 12:30 here on FS2. As I mentioned, first race, Sarah, we begin with the 2-year-old's a major defection with the 2-to-1 morning line favorite and Kiss Me Slow coming out. We do have several others that have some experience. So let's start with the one that has some dirt experience, discussing number 3 in here, Vespera, for Christophe Clement. You have her nowhere. I thought she was a little bit green in that race. Are you kind of questioning the overall quality of that field?
That's exactly where I was going with that, and I thought that she was a little bit green in that race. She took some money, which is always a good sign. I thought that she was part of what was a contentious pace and had every right to get a little bit tired. But I thought that we could be seeing somebody else in this race that might be a little bit tougher than what we've seen in terms of the quality from that race, because she's got that note about climbing. I didn't really see much of that in that race, and I didn't really think it was that fast of a race that if somebody can run in this race, they might be able to beat her. So I just didn't want her at a super short price coming in, but the experience does always count for something.
I do think that number 7, Ice Cream Boat, she'll take some money as she does come out of a live race. And we unfortunately have not seen Senza Parole come back, but Stunner returned to break her maiden impressively with an 86 Beyer.
Yeah, I mean, we also have that pedigree aspect with her. She is that half to chocolate gelato who was not exactly a superstar, but was a very good 2-year-old and very precocious for Todd Pletcher as well. So we know that that's a race that has produced some live runners going forwards, and I think that she makes a lot of sense. She's just got to show a little bit more speed today, I think, than she did last time to be so far back.
Right. She was off a bit slow, and then I thought she was just kind of green early, climbing a little from kickback, just not really knowing what she was doing. She did run on mildly down the lane, but it was really hard to do, I think, any kind of decisive running when you had a horse like Senza Parole just running away from the field. I went with a horse who has experience, but that came on the turf, and that's number 5, Sharp Smile. This is a daughter Practical Joke, and I think overall Practical Jokes are better on the dirt and sprinting. The Dam, she was multiple stakes placed on the dirt, and she's a half to Aero Force, who's a graded stakes winner, albeit on wet dirt, but also on the turf. But there's some other siblings that have won on the dirt. She was kind of running around that race early with her head up in the air, never really allowing herself to drop down into stride. And I think that was an indication of maybe I don't think she didn't handle the turf, but just maybe not being as comfortable as one would hope. And furthermore, the blinkers going on, I think, should resolve that. So that's why I went with Sharp Smile. You obviously have some interest in her too.
Yeah, I think this horse just makes sense switching over to the dirt. I like my practical jokes on the dirt more so than the turf as well. And that half sibling that you were mentioning, Aeroforce, he actually went off as the favorite in Gun Runner's Risen Star, which I thought was a fun little fact. And he did not run well. But he was in there, and he was actually favored. So he was more of that successful juvenile. That then
He's Brad Cox, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
And then he had more of a successful career on turf after that. But he was second in the 2015 Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf. So, I mean, there's pedigree for this one. But it seems as though with the dam only running on dirt and having that mixed production and ability to produce a runner that can handle either surface, then I think that this one will appreciate the surface switch. But I went to a horse that is a big price but has that dam side precocity in the number 2 Fires Out with this one, because the full sibling won on debut, then came back to win a graded stakes race, maybe a questionable non-disqualification in one of those, and then won on the turf after that. 2 other half siblings did run well on debut, finishing second in both of theirs, one of them actually running second in Pretty Birdie's winning race. And with 2 your first time starters, it's a limited sample size on dirt for Jorge Duarte Jr., but he does do well, positive ROI, 21% past 5 years.
Oh, I always respect what he brings over. To me, it just felt as though it was a pedigree that, yes, you're absolutely right, there's precocity, but a little more tilted to turf. The Flameaways, their numbers, turf versus dirt, are quite glaring, actually. They're much better on turf, and we see at least really early, we're, 80 minutes out to the first race, fully subscribed is all turf.
Right.
So a lot of times, though, when Chad Brown does this, it speaks to, their talent. Did work impressively, albeit on a synthetic surface. So what are we dealing with there? At OBS, 10 flat, not asked at all. And I just thought looked really kind of powerful. But again, that was back in April. But I'll let you talk about the pedigree and why there's question marks.
Well, I think that when we see something like this from Chad Brown, we just trust that judgment so much to think, well, this horse is working well on dirt. This horse did have that fast work. It was on synthetic, like you mentioned. And so maybe the decision being made to put this horse on the dirt, that she can just handle it so well in the morning, why not see what you have in the afternoon? And then you can always go to turf as your backup. But I don't really want to take this horse at a super short price that she is right now. She is taking a lot of that money. There's a little bit of buzz about this horse apparently online with this one being able to run a little bit. I just thought that on the dam side, it's really turfy. The Tiz the Laws have been running a lot better on the turf, I think, significantly more so than his dirt sprinters so far. So
agreed.
I didn't want this one, especially if she's going to be favored.
Right. I thought I would lean on experience in the first race, as we'll turn the page and look at race number 2, claiming non-3 life for 25, 6.5 furlongs. Top pick scratch for me. I was really interested in Collected Special here, so I defaulted to number 8, Collect from Ike, who's a big long shot. But let's talk a little bit about, who do you think is favored in here? Is Maginera favored? He's a tough read for me, because a lot of times he runs winning races. He just doesn't win.
Right, and that's sort of the problem I have with the horse that I ended up picking on top, who also comes out of this race. But he does run consistently well, and I think that asking for that level of consistency at this level of racehorse, it's at least not nothing going forwards to have a horse that you can rely on to run their race. Usually isn't good enough to get him into the winner's circle, but he does always seem to be right there. And I'd prefer him coming out of this race than Neuschwanstein, who seemed to have everything his own way on the front end and just sort of
I disagree. I thought that Maginera had everything his own way. Saving ground right in that pocket trip, tipped out, and just run down late by a horse who had a much wider trip than he in Montebello. But Neuschwanstein, I get why you wouldn't want to take him at a short price, because it feels like that last race lives in isolation. We've seen the Wayne Potts horses, at least in the last month and a half since getting back
really
here to Belmont at the Big A, really improve. And now, and I have the utmost respect for John Toscano, but claimed out of his barn.
Right, and I just didn't think that he was going to get away with the kind of fractions that he did in that last race, where they've decided to not be aggressive with When Love Takes Over anymore. Nobody really pressed him and looked him in the eye towards his inside in there. And I thought that I don't really see the hot pace in here, but somebody with these blinkers changes, with a couple of these horses dropping in class, I thought that somebody might want to try to be a little bit more aggressive. Don't know who that might be, but it might be somebody. And I just didn't want him, after that last race, where it did seem as though that was a big step forward for him, maybe not getting the same kind of tactics in here.
I will say that Neuschwanstein, most annoying name
What
ever.
is it, the Sleeping Beauty Castle?
Yeah, because it is, but I feel like it always comes out of my mouth completely different every time. He was held by the scratch of Collective Special because
Yes.
Collective Special had to go from that inside post position. And I'm wondering if the horse I put on top is going to be at least forward. I just thought with Collect from Ike, the drop in class needed and albeit it was on a wet track, and I do think this horse might prefer a wet going as opposed to the fast that he gets today. I just thought, at the end of the day, I wanted somebody weird. And this is a horse that, at least physically, every time I see him, I like what I see. So in a more realistic spot. Now, you you touched on it, but why did you like Magnificent Mile more than Maginera than Neuschwanstein?
I just thought that last time he was off a little bit awkwardly, and then he had some excuses prior to that where he's not the horse that's winning races often. He has that second-itis and finishing third as well, but he's going to be a better price, I think, than Maginera because he had some excuses in Saratoga where the barn was much cooler than it is right now, and so I think that horses that are running a little bit better than the barn might be going in general are ones that I give a longer look to, especially at bigger prices where they're sort of outrunning how the trend is going at that time. And in that 3-horse field, he had no choice but to be aggressive towards the inside and not give up that inside position with the other two in there. And I just thought that he's overall been facing some tougher company and still running respectably well enough that I want to give him another opportunity in here, especially with how the barn is going. And that's why I also end up having Herd on the street a little bit further down as well. I know that pace just stopped out of nowhere in that last race, but that horse did run very well.
And I thought he rushed up into that pace collapse. So I just, again, I want them to keep repeating these efforts. It feels like, a lot of them we see from the barn have these one-figure races that, are you willing to take them off short prices? But I guess I'm willing to pay the price today is going against them a bit. Then we have the feature, race number 3. It is the grade 3 Knickerbocker, mile and an eighth on the turf course. A compact but very competitive field. We'll start by talking about, I'm assuming the horse that might be a slight favorite in number 4, Reckoning Force in here, as we did see the other pace potential Irish Prophet come out. Reckoning Force, I think, has the opportunity to be forward. He had no shot last time when he was squeezed back at the start. He was in no man's land, and then once he finally extricated himself to the extreme outside down the very long stretch at Kentucky Downs, he really ran on well behind a gate-to-wire winner.
He did, and I thought that he's been keeping some quality company overall, even though he had those 2 allowance races where he finished second to Gray's Fable, who we saw do well up in Saratoga, and then Reckoning Force winning over Red Run, a horse that ran very well at Keeneland not that long ago and who had some graded stakes credentials as well. And I just thought that the trip last time would be so different coming into today with the short field that we have and the opportunity to really take advantage of the scratch of Irish Prophet, a horse that I didn't really consider as a win candidate, but who was likely to be the speed in this race. And now maybe he could be the one that inherits that position, because that's a dangerous position to be in this race, because there's only so many horses.
Yeah, exactly. Let's take a look back at the meeting in the grade 3 Monmouth. Is that the race we have, guys? Because I didn't put in the Kentucky Downs race. I was actually going to show Reckoning Force's win at Saratoga. But here's Fort Washington and Seizure Boston. Seizure Boston's down on the inside. And I know trainer Jimmy Toner saying, well, maybe he didn't feel as comfortable down there. But when the chute comes up here, he's not in tight.
Wide open spaces.
He just got run down.
Right. And I think that I agree with the concept that some horses do not want to be inside of other horses. They get a little intimidated by that crowding.
Yeah.
We see Farbridge as the opposite to that. He is the one that wants to be
an outlier.
in that. Yeah, but I get that thinking, and I think that's valid. But he saved all the ground in that race, and I don't really think it was that close quarters for him to not be able to sustain his run. I think he just got run down by a horse that he's been in good form as of late in Fort Washington, and I felt as though his second before that to Highway Robber, who came back with a decent win at Keeneland, was okay. But overall, I just sort of wonder who's going to get the same kind of trip that he did at Monmouth in that race where he still got run down.
We also see 2 from the Chad Brown barn, obviously very competitive, and the winner is, I thought, it was a little bit of a boat race last time out in that allowance field. He was able to save all the ground, but he did have to kind of come around the eventual winner in Battle of Normandy. We'll see. Is he a horse that, I think he's still searching for an identity here for the Chad Brown barn. There feels as though there is talent. He hinted at that as a 2 into early 3-year-old. You've landed on redistricting. This is a little bit of a guess, but I can understand being confident in taking a horse like this that Chad is confident in his placement of him coming back off the bench.
And he does do well when he spots his horses off significantly long layoffs like this. And I just want Manny to have this horse saving ground and not losing a ton of position. And originally, looking at this race when it was intact, I was on, and the winner is, but he has just been compromised by slow pace after slow pace over and over again. And it's likely to be the same again today. So I just thought that redistricting would be the one who was saving more ground than he was and potentially being a little bit more forward than he was.
All right, interesting. Okay, so me reckoning force, you redistricting. Race number 4 is for claiming 16.92 life, going a mile. And we'll start by talking about the drop down in here. First time for a tag is number 3, Wine Responsibly, stretching back out, second off the layoff for Linda Rice. And I don't think he necessarily lost anything in that allowance race. It was his first start back, lost some position. He did lose that around the turn and just kind of stayed on evenly, hinting at a horse that I know he broke his maiden off the turf event, but that is probably more suited to a little bit more ground.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that this is an aggressive drop, but it's a drop that makes sense because where do you go next with a horse that had that 2-year-old form where he was competitive in some of those 2-year-old state-bred races and came back to the races and he didn't run badly, but he sort of showed that he hasn't changed much since then.
Physically, exactly what I wrote.
All
Really
right,
didn't change 2
to
to 3 whatsoever.
The same because, I mean, when you see those numbers, you kind of wonder, was it the layoff or have they just not grown up or done much to move forwards? And if that's the case, then it just makes sense to put him in a spot where he could be competitive. This is a big drop down. This horse is going to be a big favorite. I couldn't see past this one, at least as far as picking on top. But after that, it's certainly a competitive group amongst each other. And that's the nicest way that I can put it.
That was much nicer than what I was going to say. Again, you're dealing with a Wayne Potts horse who his last race could make him a winner here. But do you trust him to repeat it in York Tavern?
I will say that at least for him, it's not the first 70 Beyer speed figures he's ever hit in his races, but it's been a very long time since we've seen that kind of success from him in terms of the numbers that he's been running on the racetrack. And maybe it was just a matter of finding a group of horses that he fit in better with. And Very Funny is not exactly a winning type of horse, but I kind of wanted to see it again a little bit with him as far as where we're going with this horse with that big improvement.
Tennis Trotter, elephant in the room.
Yeah, I mean,
never been on the dirt.
Well, and we are showing the Manny Franco feature apparently on America's Day at the Races right before this race. So that feature winner angle could come into play here.
And I will say this about Tennis Trotter. He should be on the lead here.
Yeah.
Especially with a rider like Manny, dropping in class.
It's a big drop.
First time in the dirt. You don't want him to take any kickback. And it's his best way to possibly win.
Yeah, I mean, I would not be surprised by this horse doing well in this spot. It is that unknown, but he's run competitively against some much better turf horses. And I think winning on debut for a barn that does not really have their horses ready to go first time out is also a feather in his cap in a way, as far as just maybe overall ability that might be enough to put him ahead of some of the others in this field.
Is it a single to start off the pick 6 here?
I would say so.
All right, Wine Responsibly. As we'll get to one more race before we take a break. Kicking off the late pick 5 is race 5, maiden special weight on the turf. An interesting one at that. And we'll take a look at Snippy.
A hilarious name.
Snippity Snip. As he went to lead last time. It felt as though that first race kind of really woke him up, and I thought he was awfully game.
You think gelding,
her. See, this is why.
This is
why.
It's like East Coast girl,
Right.
the gelding.
It's the gelding.
Yeah.
I know, it's so wrong that my mind goes, when you talk about
you do this
snippety,
enough,
you
I
think
mean,
about
I
a
don't know.
gelding, you know? She was really woken up just to, I think, in talking, I did those 2-year-old reports up in Saratoga,
Those were fun.
and Chad Brown was very high on Lavender Disaster. So I just
Who had
think,
a disaster in
what?
who had the disaster in the Miss Grillo,
Oh,
and she was also the 10, and I was like, oh,
Yeah.
Lavender Disaster, isn't that kind of funny? Like,
Yeah, I
yep.
agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
She's fine. She just got put off course.
Yeah. So anyway, I just thought of the horses who have run, Snippety Snip is the likeliest, I think, potentially the best of those.
Of the ones with experience, yeah,
Yes.
I would agree with that, and I think that she's likely to be a little bit more forward than some of the other horses.
Now
in
you
this
went
field.
to All Night Revival, who I was very disappointed in this.
I was
in that effort.
too.
And I feel like the fact that she ran basically the same race on a figure standpoint, is there any room for improvement? Because we saw it from Snippety Snip.
You're right. I don't know. I want to give her one more shot though, because that first race was against a horse that is still undefeated, and
great.
That photo finish at Keeneland is going to be one of life's greatest mysteries to me. How she got her nose down in time to win that Jessamine. But I know a horse that you liked a little bit too when she was breaking her maiden. But she's very good, and I at least thought that she was a little bit wider than some of the others going into that last race. Is it enough of an excuse? Maybe not. But I do want to give her one more opportunity at what I think will be at least a fair price today after that first race was so solid.
Okay. I did want to show number 4, Winning Streep, in her last race, albeit at Laurel. She's going to have to improve. I get it. But here she is. She's making this 3 wide move. She's wide throughout the running of this race. So you can see her ears go up. Mm-hmm. This is a horse, too, that dropped a rider when she hit the front.
That's probably why her ears went up. She was like, ooh, time to...
So clearly lacks a bit of focus once she gets herself to the lead. Ears still up here, you can tell. She is not laying herself down. She's green. Okay, this horse comes up next to her. She re-engages a little bit. This just speaks to me a horse who's still figuring it out. And I think it's up to Abner Adorno, who luckily knows her well, just to get the timing right. Maybe he learned a little bit last time. Maybe we moved a bit early. Just get your timing right. And I think she showed that there is some ability in there. So I thought I gave her a little bit of a look. Look, I put her 4th because there are some pedigrees in here that of first-time starters that I thought were awfully intriguing. I'll let you talk about number 5, Laurel Lynn.
Yeah, I mean, coming in for Grand Motion, when we have those synthetic workouts over at Fair Hills, we don't really know where they stack up in terms of competition coming in. But I just thought that this one seemed to be well spotted and has that very Irish pedigree coming into this spot. There's a little bit of pedigree on the dam side as far as like a couple of siblings that were able to take to the turf well.
Well, all 3 foals are winners.
Right.
Granted, one over jumps, and I think the average distance is about 1.25 miles. So there's a possibility that she wants to go
further.
longer. But
She seems to be working really well coming in.
and just consistent. There is a bottom in this filly. So
Yeah.
you know that she is fit and ready to go. She has works posted back to early July and has not missed a beat since then. And she was a Goff's yearling purchase for the equivalent of $169,000. Then you also have number 1, Lying by a Mission, a Hello Yumzane, who is actually pretty good with his 2-year-olds. He was a turf sprinter. So there's a little bit more of a precocious type of pedigree, maybe a little bit more with Lying by a Mission, but not quite as established. The unraced dam, there was 1 winner from 2 foals to run, but that sibling did win 3 races as a 2-year-old.
He did, and I mean, I looked at this one and thought maybe sprinting, but it's Chad Brown, and he's not putting this horse in here if he doesn't think she can handle the grass.
Yeah, I think on the bottom, there's enough distance in that pedigree. She sold as a yearling at Arcana for $68,000. So not the biggest purchase price for these connections.
Yeah, and I mean, Banner 18 does get in, so there's your coupled entry, and there goes your price.
Also true, because Banner 18, she deserves a look too. Just that typical kind of one pace sprinting.
Where you wanted to be inside, and that horse just wired the field at a huge price for Mike Maker and Miriam Swire, who did not return and run well, really showing that was the part of the turf that you wanted to be on, and she just didn't really have the opportunity to be there.
Yeah, and it looks like as though she'll appreciate the stretch out in distance. Well, that's the first 5 down. Stay tuned, more Talking Horses to come after we hear from our sponsors.
Born in the foothills of the Adirondacks over 150 years ago, the Saratoga brand has become synonymous with quality. Carefully crafted spring water. Each stunning blue glass bottle is created with the same attention to detail and care that has been the Saratoga hallmark for generations. So open a bottle, take a sip, and savor the Saratoga experience. Saratoga, an American classic that's always in good taste. Make every day exquisite.
Welcome back, and thanks to Saratoga Spring Water for sponsoring Talking Horses. I'm Maggie, she's Sarah, and we have the late pick 4 coming at you as race 6, maiden special weight for the 2-year-old sprinting on the turf course. And a bit of guesswork here, Sarah, while we do have several that have experience, most of which has come on the dirt.
It has, and I think that those are some horses that are likely to take some money in this race just because of the fields that they come out of and how productive those races have been moving forwards. And I don't love showing a dirt race for a turf race coming up, but we can take a look back at Moment's Notice and Social Hour, who are both coming out of a race won by the very impressive Jonathan's Way, who then went on to win the Iroquois at Churchill. And I thought they both ran fine, but looking at both of them, I can't say that I was overwhelmed by turf pedigree to say that this is where they were supposed to be all along. Now, certainly they could handle it. These are trainers that are both certainly capable of making that surface switch with their 2-year-old maidens, but I feel like these horses just get bet based on dirt form.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. And to take a short price on them seems, just against what you should be doing. I've always liked Moment's Notice. He's been a little bit disappointing, but did lose, I would say all chance last time out with that significant stumble. And being a son of More Than Ready, obviously we've seen his progeny year after year do well on the turf. And there is a half who tried the turf one time and won on it. You know what I mean? And ran a good figure too. So I don't know why they never went back to it after that, but anyway, whatever. So yes, I think Moment's Notice is the one that I would prefer out between him and Social Hour, as neither of us have Social Hour anywhere. But we went and felt for me, just most comfortable taking City of Oscars, who has that good turf race.
He does, and look, he had a decent trip in that race at Kentucky Downs. I thought he was able to save some ground in there, and that's at a premium most of the time. And he did get a nice split. I didn't really feel like he got steadied or stuck in traffic or had this wild and crazy trip coming into there, but he just showed that nice improvement first to second start. And we've seen Mark Casse be so dangerous with his 2-year-olds. He took a lot of money in this race. He ended up finishing a narrowly defeated second. And just looking at who is meant for this surface and who has that experience and those credentials in this field, he just seemed like a very obvious type of horse to end up landing on because he does have this very good race.
You feel more confident taking him at a short price. Like, he makes sense to take at a short price. Number 2, St. Erling. Now, talking about, decent dirt form, really, his dirt form, at least his last race, makes sense to me. He was beaten by 2 next time out winners in JJ Zozo and Wild and Crazy Night, and actually has a little pedigree. Frosted, not the most influential when it comes to turf, but is half to multiple stakes winner Cyrenusa. Cyrenusa? Is that how you say it? Now, there's only been one other winner from 5 others to try it, but I just thought that the form, the numbers progressively getting better, and there, as you said, enough pedigree to make me think that he could be competitive.
Sure, I don't think that horse is impossible, and we saw that rider have a win yesterday. I think you interviewed him, Sammy Marin. Yeah, yep. So, I mean, nice to get that first win in New York for him, I believe it was.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, nice kid, Venezuela, I think.
Okay.
Venezuela. But rides at Tampa and Monmouth. Number 9, Pure Money, you have second. Why?
Yeah, I mean, just there is a little bit of turf pedigree. The Dam was more proficient on the dirt, but she seemed to run similar types of races on the turf for this one. I felt as though this horse also comes out of a race where Moment's Notice was in there and just really never had the opportunity to save ground in that race. He was very wide, and I thought just maybe getting over to the surface, maybe he could take that step forward on turf. And I just wanted somebody who was a little bit of a price in here, and there is at least that Dam being that half sister to a horse who was very proficient on turf and gangbuster.
Okay. Number 10, King Express. I don't have in my top 4, but did find him interesting. Will have to run faster. Another Mark Casse trainee, but I just thought very green in and amongst horses early on. Didn't have that much early speed, but actually ran well once he was clear.
And it clearly needs to mentally take a step forward, especially now breaking from the outside in here. And I liked Turk and Wendy a little bit, who did not get into this race, who defeated this one last time, but he needs to take a step forward, certainly could.
Race number 7, 10 claimer mile on the main track. And I don't know, this one of those crapshoots.
Really just, you look at this race and you think, oh man, anyone could win.
Anyone can win. Anyone on their best day could win here. I landed on Optic Way. I'm going to try him one more time. I don't think 7 furlongs is right for him. I think he needs more ground. He puts the blinkers back on, gets back to a mile, lands on the outside. He was used hard in that race. Not a horse that particularly loves a wet track at the end of the day. So I'm going to give him one more shot here for Gustavo Rodriguez.
That's completely fair. I looked at him for a while. I looked at many of these for a while. Ultimately, I went to a horse that I think is going to get the stalking kind of trip, and that's Milton the Monster, who comes in here and who I thought would be a fair enough price because he has some form that hasn't been very much to look at as of late, but he exits a race that I thought had been very productive moving forwards. We've seen some horses come out of there and do well. He'd been facing some tougher company at Saratoga, and he also had that excuse of coming in off of that layoff in the start 3 starts ago. He was avoided claim prior to that. Is he the same horse that he was last year? Probably not, or earlier this year, not at all, but it seems as though he's one that's just likely going to find the right group of horses today and likely to sit a reasonable trip in here because I think that Optic Way is going to go with those blinkers coming back on towards the outside. And I also wonder if anybody else is going to try to be forward in here.
Yeah, no, I mean, Daddy knows. I don't know. Some last few starts have not been forward, but that was going 6 and 7, so he's likely to be forward in here yet again. And so I totally get it. You have another Wayne Potts horse. Last race lives in isolation in number 8, Cumberland Blues. He'll have to repeat it to win me over, but I get
I thought that was a good ride.
Who? What?
Cumberland Blues with Christopher Elliott.
Elliott?
Yeah. This was this was just a gutsy ride because he had a horse that was getting out and he knew that he needed to go inside to have an opportunity to run on and was able to keep the horse in control enough to get that split and not interfere with the horse to his outside to the point where he was going to have to deal with some sort of objection, inquiry, disqualification. And you saw after this race, I mean, the horse got out significantly. You can see him starting to right here, but once he's clear, he lets it happen because he knows he's already in front and going to win. And I just thought that was a very masterful ride from a rider that we get to see for the first time this meet and who really is just getting started.
Yeah, son of Stuart Elliott.
Yeah.
So race number 8 is a optional allowance for the New York breds going a mile on the turf, and we do see some horses dropping out of stakes company, whether it be open or New York restricted. Let's start by talking about Brock Nardini as well. I think we can kind of include her in the same conversation as Money Grab, as well as we'll take a look back at the Susie O'Kane. And Money Grab just completely out of position. This race, not necessarily dominated forwardly by any means, but she just had too much to do.
She did, and she's a horse that's been kind of unlucky, and I have yet to decide if it's her causing her own bad luck or if it's just a set of circumstances because she's had some serious trips. I mean, she never had the opportunity to save ground in this race. Going back to the prior start, she tossed her head at the break. She's had some serious trips that have really inhibited the ability that I think is there for her. And I thought that Brock Nardini was the one who got the money trip in that race with being able to save ground and having that position. And then you can forgive her not running quite as well in that Virginia Oaks where we saw a dead heat finish in there. I think that these are horses that are just facing some, not necessarily the softest company coming out of stakes races, but softer than what they were last time.
Yes, I agree. And Brock Nardini, even to her credit in that, sound defeat in the Virginia Oaks, she made this ridiculous early 4-wide move that, when do those ever win? I landed on number 9, Collaboration here, a horse that you have for the, second in the mix. She needs to get out of the gate. Her last 2 starts, she's just been a little kind of hesitant, and it's allowed her to lose position. And I'd love to see her just ridden out of there by Dylan. I do like a mile for her. The races are there for her to win. She just needs to put it all together. And she gets class relief, too.
Yeah. I've liked this horse several times. I think that she makes a lot of sense in this spot. I just usually like her when she's a little bit more of a price than she's not going to be today, because she does have those races coming in where she had some trips at the start last time. She had that race where she finished a good second at a big price. And then if you go back to her form last year, I mean, she was right there in some of those state bred races with some trips or not. So she makes a lot of sense in here. I wouldn't leave her out of any multi-race wagers. And then what is your thought on overacting? Because I can't decide if she's all that good or if she had that race that was just a really nice trip for her over some turf that had some give in it, and then had some other trips that were a little bit softer as well.
I do agree with you. I think she's likely to take a lot of money given connections, and she's missed a good chunk of, the turf season for New York breds. But maybe she needed the time. Maybe she'll come back better. I do agree with you that she's taken advantage of some things going her way, and how good is she? I'm not totally sure.
Right, and this is a race where she was able to save ground, and she got through and didn't have to deal with traffic, and then she's not a dirt horse, but then she was favored, and I thought just kind of disappointing in that last race. I know the note says she was hard held and she was a little bit wide, but
and maybe something happened.
Maybe
that's why she's been gone.
Right, but she hasn't been on the racetrack much in general, and I just don't really want her now drawing all the way towards the outside. And unlikely to get the same kind of trip that she has been when she's been successful.
And I feel like we all missed the wedding first time out when she was such a mess.
Yeah.
She did everything wrong. I think Javier said, you know what, screw it. I'm just going to let her run. And it all worked out at 8-1.
Yep.
As race number 9 to round things out, State Bred Maiden 40 mile to 16th on the turf. We do have a drop down runner in Saint Chapelle. And then you have some horses who have run okay at this level. We both land on Lady Lauban in here. For me, Sarah, that last race, which many come out of, including Starlight Dancer, was really just kind of a merry-go-round race, and Lady Lauban, to me at least, did the most running.
And she had a little bit of a stumble at the start too, and I think that she made up some good ground in there, and that was her first time in for a tag, and that was one of those days where we really saw how significant it was to be forward and be towards the inside. And I think actually she doesn't draw into this race, but Pure's Performance ran huge in that race, and I was actually going to pick her in here if she got into the field, because she had no business running the kind of race that she did, to be wide and still rally into that glacial pace that held together. I think that Lady Lauban is going to run much better today than she did in that last race. I think she had some valid excuses in there. She hasn't been consistent with some of her other races when she has been running against some tougher company. She has sort of some races that pop up and could get her there, and other races that she just doesn't do much running at all. But I think there was a legitimate excuse last time, and she's just facing company that makes sense finally.
And I do think consistently on her numbers, she's probably a little better than these in here over just on your body of work. What do you do with Saint Chapelle? She has to get out of the gate. Her one lone good race, which came last year as a late 3-year-old, she was forward. She's just incredibly one pace, so maybe they're trying to resolve that with those blinkers on.
It's possible. I didn't really want her. She's going to take money in here, first time in for a tag. It's an angle that you see usually attract a lot of wagering support, because generally there's a reason for it. But I want to see something from her that's just a little bit quicker than what we have seen over those last 2 races. I wasn't really impressed, and I think that this is a softer field, but I don't think those last 2 races were the toughest fields.
I was going to say, are either of us going to be surprised when Starlight Dancer is able to wire this field?
No, I mean, I think that she makes a lot of sense coming in, but she sort of has that second itis that's been adding up over those last two races. And I don't think that she ran the best race of the horses that are coming out of that common race by any means last time out.
She didn't, but she's dealing with a race that does not feature many other ones that look to be forward in here.
No, that's valid. And I mean, she does draw very favorably once again.
Correct. Well, that will do it for this 9-race card here on this Sunday afternoon. Belmont at the Big A. And don't forget, if you want to get in on the action, make sure you do so with your Naira Bets account. New members earn that $200 deposit match bonus when you use promo code MATCH200. Check on NairaBets.com to get all the details and to get started today. And then you can use all your track stats, including those track trends. Sarah mentioned them often, the turf being tilted certain ways throughout this card. Also, all the stats and betting insights. Check out NairaBets.com to get that going as well. Maybe you win a few with the information you find there. And we also have that super effective bonus going on when you hit a super at back, as I like to call it. You get that 20% bonus. Make sure you opt in over at NairaBets.com, and you can watch all the action, at least the first 4 that is, with Greg, Sarah, and I on America's Day at the races. Coverage starting at 12:30 over on FS2. Sarah, it's been a pleasure. Well done. You gonna run upstairs now?
Yeah, I think so. You're going to run out to the
leisurely
paddock?
walk?
Yeah, I don't know about run, but I'll be there.
I'm going to leisurely walk
Yeah.
to the paddock. Sounds good.
Well, you're closer.
Yeah, exactly. Be careful in that elevator.
Yeah, scary. That's the biggest gamble we do every day. I mean,
Exactly. Well, Chris Griffin, he, as always, is coming up next with a reprise of those scratches and changes. Best of luck, everyone, and have a great Sunday.
Born in the foothills of the Adirondacks over 150 years ago, the Saratoga brand has become synonymous with quality, carefully crafted spring water. Each stunning blue glass bottle is created with the same attention to detail and care that has been the Saratoga hallmark for generations. So open a bottle, take a sip, and savor the Saratoga experience. Saratoga, an American classic that's always in good taste. Make every day exquisite.